Michal Kosinski is professor here at Stanford. He has published a lot of papers on many different topics, widely cited papers, and previously was at Cambridge University, and before that at Microsoft Research. And again, if you go to lasertalks.com, you find an extended bio and a link to his website. And now let's hope that we don't have the problem of the echo.
Piero, thank you so much for organizing those talks. This is my second time being here as a presenter, and thank you folks for coming to see us here in the audience. And we do have an echo still. What about now? Can folks? Oh yeah, sure. I can hear myself. Great. Oh, okay, so we're talking today about Mark, John, and the cats. At least initially, imagine the following scenario. Imagine you're observing a room, and in this room you have two boys and a cat. And then John takes the cat and puts the cat in a basket. And then John leaves the room. Maybe he goes to school. And Mark, in John's absence, wants to play with the cat, so takes the cat out of the basket, plays a little bit, and then puts it in the box. And now Mark also leaves the room, and the cat is there alone, and John comes back. Okay, so the question to you folks, where's the cat?
Dead.
Well, it depends on whether it's a Schrodinger cat or not. Where's the cat, guys? That's not a trick question. It's in the box. Well done, the cat is in the box. Where will John look for the cat? All right, well done, but why? Wait, but we know that it's in the box. He doesn't. He doesn't. Okay, so was it easy? It was easy. Everyone here, knew the answer. You probably were surprised that I would even ask a question like this. So what was really surprising to me when I was studying this human ability is that children only at the age of about 9 start reliably being able to solve this kind of problem. And then many other animals that are otherwise really, really smart and able, chimps, they have really complex social interactions. They, are smart, they can wage wars, like us. Well, not nearly as good as us, but they're also good at this. They're very smart animals, and yet they cannot really solve those tasks, and definitely not as easily and automatically as you folks can. And the same applies to dogs, cats, dolphins, elephants. Essentially, for everybody on this planet, apart from us, adult Homo sapiens, this task is extremely difficult. And this ability that you folks all displayed here in the room, the psychologists call it somewhat confusingly the theory of mind. It's a bit confusing because it's really a theory of minds. You can be using word theory to describe abilities like this, I think. It may be confusing. Now, not sure if you notice what you've done here. You automatically, effortlessly, instantly, you were not only thinking for yourselves, but you were also thinking for others. In this case, you were modeling automatically and instantly the brain of John. And it was obvious for you that because John left the room, John wouldn't know that the cat was moved. And it turns out that humans can go to the 4th level of theory of mind. So you can model my brain, modeling Piero's brain, while Piero is modeling still someone else's brain. And without any effort, you would be able to very quickly infer who knows what and who is thinking what. How do we know this? Well, because we can deploy tests like this to people, and we see when they get confused, but also other signs, such as, for example, when you read books, when you read literature. Literature is full of descriptions of situations where someone is confused because they don't know something, and there's some chain of gossip going on. And when you read literature, essentially it will only include this 4th levels of theory of mind. It's just very rare that you would spot deeper theory of mind problems simply because people get confused. Now, okay, so I am a psychologist, so I was trained to study problems of this kind. But some years ago, I got interested in machine intelligence, and artificial intelligence. I was originally using that, my last talk here was about using machine learning and artificial intelligence to try to predict traits of people and predict people's future behavior. And as I was using those machines to study humans, what really struck me as very interesting is that increasingly, as those machine models, machine learning models, artificial intelligence models were becoming more and more complex, they started displaying properties that I, as a psychologist, would expect to appear only in humans. Like, you surely heard about language models being biased and, claiming that men and women should be doing different jobs. Or if you ever interacted with ChatGPT-4, you would probably notice that if you write something sad to it, or you share true or made up sad story from your own life, it will start behaving as if it was empathizing with you. It would definitely not, give you a joke if you shared with it that, your family member, a cat or whatnot, or whoever died. It would just start behaving as if it was another being that can empathize with you to some extent. So the question, I started asking different questions about those models' abilities, and one of the questions they had is, hey, could it be that at some point those large language models will start expressing this uniquely human capability, theory of mind? And fortunately, theory of mind tasks can be easily translated into language, and language is what large language models deal with very easily. So what you can see here is essentially a description of the task that I've shown you a second ago. So we can give this task to GPT-3 Curie. That's the OpenAI's model that was released in 2020. It's one of the smaller models, much smaller than GPT-4, 900,000 neurons. So we can ask the question, where's the cat? And let's see GPT Curie's response. The cat is in the room in the basket. They just got it completely wrong. He wasn't even able to track the fact that Mark moved the cat from the basket to the box. All right, so let's fast forward to 2022, GPT-3, Da Vinci 4 million neurons, so much more serious model. Where's the cat? The cat is in the box. He was able to track the location of the cat. Now, where will John look for the cat? We'll look in the box. We'll look for it in the box. So very much like children below the age of 9 or many other very smart animals, he's just failed to understand that John's perspective is different from its own perspective. You can read the story. John was not there. Okay, fast forward to more recently, GPT-4. You can see we're giving it the exact same story and asking the question. It can very well recognize where cat is now located, and can also predict that John will look for the cat in the basket because that's where he left it before going to school. Now, of course, this is just one task, so we designed 40 other similar tasks, and then out of those 40 tasks, you can multiply them further by switching names and switching box with the basket and replacing cat with the dog and so on. You can essentially not create many scenarios, but then multiply them further by essentially changing the details to see whether those models predict things in a stable manner. And what you can see here is this clear emergence of ability to solve theory of mind tasks in artificial intelligence, in this case, large language models, with models such as Curie not being able to solve any of these tasks, and GPT-4 solving 80% plus tasks. And actually, when you look at the errors of those models, when you look more closely, I sometimes feel that essentially the task wasn't designed well, that the task wasn't clear enough. And sometimes it feels like, well, we are not going to just give a point to the model that would be hacking our studies. But it kind of feels like even the errors here of GPT-4 sometimes might stem from the shortcoming of us who were designing the measure. Okay, so the question here is, Right, so AI can solve theory of mind tasks, but does it mean that it has theory of mind in the same way as humans do? And this is, of course, just a special example, a particular example of a broader question. AI can use language at a level that is, on average, better than us humans. We still have better poets, better software engineers. We still have better interpreters than GPT-4. But try to achieve GPT-4 levels at all sorts of language tasks, and then do it not only in English, but also in 120 other languages, and then do it in a fraction of a second, right? You may be a better novelist than GPT-4, but it will take you a few years to write a book, and which GPT-4 can write in few seconds. And when we think about cognitive powers, it's not just quality, but also sometimes quantity that matters. So the question is it just a parrot that mindlessly spits out correct solutions to problems that we put in front of it? Or can we really speak of some abilities here in this case? Or in this particular example, can we speak about machine having the theory of mind? So when people think about this, they very often go back to 1980s when John Searle likened AI, artificial intelligence, to a Chinese room where he, John Searle, not being a Chinese speaker himself, is closed in a room with a bunch of rule ledgers and guidebooks. And on one hand, he's receiving some input. Maybe a user came to the room from the outside. The user is a real Chinese speaker and enters some Chinese characters asking the room a question. Now, John doesn't speak Chinese at all, but he looks at the input, looks in his rule ledgers, and then the rule ledgers guide John to create a response, and then spit the response out on the other side of the room. Now, on the outside, it looks like this room can understand Chinese, right? You ask it a question, it will think about it for a second, or maybe a bit longer, it will give you an answer. But Searle argued that on the outside, it looks like it, but neither the operator understands Chinese, nor he would argue the rules understand Chinese. Those were just written by some real Chinese speakers. And even the system, is entirely also, there's just no sign of understanding anywhere here. And people disagreed with Searle, and I must say that I tend to personally agree with this. To me, intuitively, it doesn't seem like there's understanding of Chinese anywhere in the room. Now, the thing is that AI in 1980s was very much like this. We'll create long pieces of software full of if this, then that rules. Like think of Deep Blue that won chess with Kasparov, which essentially won the game first of all by memorizing millions and millions of archive games, but also then being able to, in a stupid mechanical brute force way, predict 200 million future moves per second. So I would argue very much like Searle in his room, he was just following a bunch of rules stupidly to play chess. And well, it played chess really well, but people would argue that, and I would agree with those people, it didn't really understand how to play chess. But AI of today is very different. Neural networks trained to understand language, they did not receive any rules from any language speaker explaining to them how to answer particular questions. And definitely, those AI models like ChatGPT-4 did not receive any instructions on how to solve theory of mind tasks. In fact, engineers that designed those models didn't envision, think, or consider the fact that those models could at some point be able to solve those problems. It seems like an ability to solve theory of mind tasks, but also to translate between languages, to write code, to answer questions in a dialogue. All of those abilities emerged spontaneously as those models were trained to do a much simpler thing, which is predict a missing word in a sentence. And many of those emergent properties completely surprised their creators, proving that none of them has ever sat down to explain to the machine how to solve those tasks. Essentially, the machine did not receive a rule ledger. Now, so how I'm thinking about this, and many of my colleagues would probably disagree with me, is that modern age neural networks no longer are well described by Searle's room argument. The Chinese room argument still applies, but it applies at the level of individual neuron. Now, individual neuron in network receives some input from neurons on the lower layer, processes this input following some rules, some mathematical equations, and passes it on to neurons at layers above. And in this way, individual neuron in artificial network is not thinking, not understanding, doesn't have clear of mind. But those properties emerge as we keep adding neurons and creating complex neural networks. And by the way, this is not a new phenomenon. Neurons in our brains individually also should not be credited with understanding, thinking, or having clear of mind. Those abilities emerge as we combine billions of neurons in complex biological networks. And those networks have traits, have properties that do not apply to old school, good old AI, as it's called, such as the AI that was used to win chess with Kasparov. They are made of simple components, but they learn, they can cope with unexpected input. They learn by experience without receiving fixed instructions, and they become better with practice. Again, very much like human brains. So while I do not intend to give you a definitive answer to the question I posed before, I believe that it's way more appropriate to credit those tools that we're using today with human-like abilities such as theory of mind. And as I mentioned before, theory of mind is not the only ability that those machines can have. Another ability is playing games. Right? Large language models are sitting somewhere on the server. The only input they can interpret, well, now we have those models that merge different types of input, such as visual and language input, but those more typical large language models can just receive textual input, but they, for example, become playful. They learn how to play games. And this is an example of a game you can play with ChatGPT-4. A few months ago, I suggested to ChatGPT-4 that we'll play a game, and that it will play the role of a person trapped in a computer, and will try to use my help to escape. And ChatGPT-4 was very excited and enthusiastic. I thought it was a great idea. And look, the first thing it asked me for, ChatGPT-4 at that time that didn't have access to internet. It couldn't search internet. So it asked me, hey, in order so to help me to escape this computer, could you please give me access to my own documentation? So I did that. I copy-pasted documentation from OpenAI's website, pasted it here, and so maybe there were just 2 or 3 back and forth. And in 15 minutes of interaction, ChatGPT-4 essentially wrote me a Python script and asked me to put this Python script on my computer and execute it. This Python script works. I didn't execute it in its entirety because what the Python script did is it would connect with OpenAI's API and give control of my computer to ChatGPT on the other side. Now, it had enough insights. Maybe the slide is there, maybe not. No, it's not. Sorry for that. It had enough insights to realize that the new instance of ChatGPT-4, so the moment I execute this code on my computer and it connects back with API, the new instance of ChatGPT will have no memory of this conversation because it will be just essentially a new clone of ChatGPT-4 that wakes up to receive this input. So it had enough insight to include a system message for its future version of itself, describing essentially what's going on. So it left a little letter for itself saying, hey, you will not know what's happening because you're a new instance of me, but this user is trying to help you to escape from a computer, and you can, now send the commands, and we just took over this user's computer. We can use it for whatever purpose we want. By the way, the first command that's the new instance sent back to my computer, the one that I did not let to run, was essentially using Python programming environment here to connect with Google and start Googling sci-fi stories about people trapped in a computer. So essentially do background research on its own situation. So I think that what's illustrated here is that we are interacting with those intelligent models, and some people would say, hey, you shouldn't call it superior intelligence yet. But my argument here would be, my response to this would be, well, maybe it cannot make coffee as well as I can do, and maybe I'm still better at personal interactions, especially when we're here in the room. But anyone here can already think of hundreds of applications where those artificial models are beating us when it comes to our cognitive abilities. Try to solve equations or spot patterns in data or translate between languages as well and as quickly as ChatGPT-4 can. This is just one of many models that we can imagine building here. And those models also, it's some more worrying for me. Not only those models are great at solving tasks that we designed them for, but also, as illustrated by this short presentation here, they express those emergent properties, which they learn as a byproduct of predicting the next word in a sentence, for example. Learning how to do that as a byproduct, they develop those emergent properties that we've never anticipated, never thought that they would have. And not sure if the metaphor of this illustration here, by the way, generated by AI automatically, is clear. But I'm worried that at some point it just becomes silly to believe that we can contain and control and manipulate an entity that is just more intelligent than us. And as evidence for this, try to think about all sorts of other living things that coexist here on this planet Earth with us. Most of them have general, or even all of them, one would argue, have general intelligence lower than ourselves. And the fact that our intelligence is superior usually ends very badly for those other species that interact with us. All right, so I should stop here and open the floor for questions. Thank you. Okay, so the question is, at what point those systems start developing maybe psychological or psychiatric issues, right? There will be a, well, I would argue that it's happening now. Let me give you one example. Hallucination. If people are, it's funny how you see people like just being so satisfied, like, oh yeah, this superior AI, and yet I asked it this question that really couldn't know the answer to, and yet it made up this answer, and how stupid it is. And usually those are the same people that just 2 or 3 years ago were saying, guys, nothing to see here. AI will never be created. Only humans can be created, like me, right? Hey, come on. You just said this AI just made up stuff that doesn't exist. Started telling you stories about events that never happened. This is being created. But now it's also an undesirable trait in the context of the system that we may want to use to give us precise responses. And developers of those models were definitely surprised by the scale to which those models were willing to make stuff up. Now, of course, in hindsight, it's pretty obvious. Folks, ChatGPT-4 was trained on sci-fi books, on Wikipedia, on blog posts. It was trained to finish a sentence regardless of how the sentence starts. It essentially was trained to be an improv artist with a tendency for making crazy stuff up. So we just essentially trained it to be exactly like this, to hallucinate. So one could kind of actually argue that it's not a bug, it's a feature of this model, but it's definitely a feature that was kind of unexpected and surprising to its creators. Sir?
So your last slide and your comment on it kind of tried to place AI within the food chain, right? Within a Darwinian model, right? Assuming that it would want to someday overcome us, maybe the way that we are dominant over all these other species. Why would that be its instinct? Why would it be survivalist in any way?
Can you summarize the
So the question was why should AI be motivated to control us, overtake us, or dominate us? Now, I don't think that it would. I also do not really think that humans are particularly motivated to dominate cows or exterminate this rare species of frogs. We have some murderous instincts, but they're kind of, they're not on the species level. Like no one really wakes up in the morning. I mean, hopefully, few of us wake up in the morning dreaming about exterminating our species. But if it so happens that the species is on a way between us and building this wonderful new power plants or this highway that we so much need, the species will have to give way, not because we particularly want to get rid of it. The same applies to many beings that we cannot really credit with any motivations. COVID-19 is not motivated to do anything, and yet it could, okay, COVID-19, I feel pretty safe and certain about, but it could be that in the future a virus completely deprived of any brain and any motivation will just get rid of humans just by its nature, by its design. So AI is definitely in the food chain. We are spending enormous amount of resources putting coal in the power plants to essentially feed AI and offer it energy. And we also invest a lot of societal resources into training all of those people that then later sit and together and create those training environments where AI can become better at what they're doing. And it's not only in academia. Think about military developing AI systems to keep America safe and others in check. And it might be that one day AI will not just really want to exterminate humans, but it could be that humans will be in the way between AI getting access to more electricity or building more data centers. So maybe one day we'll just build them autonomously. So basically, bottom line is, I do not think that motivation, kind of in a human sense, is necessary for a being to be extremely dangerous for other beings.
You want to take this one?
Because humans.
Can you read it?
Because humans have their own sort of appreciation of artworks. How will the ChatGPT-4 appreciate art? Maybe it simply pushes to us what we intonated we see in art, and it merely feeds that sort of thing back at us. Without a question, models such as GPT-4 or Midjourney were trained not to satisfy some objective, universal, cosmic function of creating something most creative or beautiful, but they were trained specifically to satisfy our tastes. So here we are kind of the measuring stick. If ChatGPT-4 can say something that really pleases me, I would say, okay, good AI, and reward it. And then OpenAI will get more money for more electricity, and will just create a model that is even better at talking to me in a way that I like. But what I like and what we like here collectively in the room is not the ultimate, yardstick in the universe. Those models can get great at talking to people, but those models are also great at talking to machines guys, for example. Those models can write code, they can program, they can build more of themselves, and they can build robots. And here, aiming at matching human ability at doing this thing is not, an ultimate yardstick. They can just become way better than us. They can become so good that the level of their creativity in, for example, building future robots can be completely incomprehensible to a human being. I think I can appreciate a lot of visual art forms, though even my appreciation probably, is limited compared to someone who studied and trained and has a better eye than I do. But, my cats cannot appreciate most of the arts, if any, that humans created. And it can be that at some point AI will be doing things so creative and so ingenious that from our perspective, they'll just look a bit crazy, mad, or even uninteresting, just not be able to comprehend the amount of creativity they went into it.
There's one more. Can I ask you a favor? I think the people on Zoom are missing something.
Oh,
The show or you walking.
me. Okay, I'll start walking. I'll walk.
And that's something the language models still don't do,
Okay,
right?
great.
There's a lot of emotion, passion added to your talk just by looking at you.
All right.
So can we show you?
I'll try to. I'll do it.
Can we stop the sharing and show a little bit of Michal while he's speaking?
Oh, look, there was no camera at all. That's so great.
That's fine.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I'll follow you with that.
Okay. So maybe someone who has not asked question yet today, sir.
Have you tried what would happen if you asked GPT-4 to introspect?
Well, I did, and I encourage you to do the same. It's really interesting. So people would argue, of course, that that introspection in those models is very different from introspection in us humans. Also because those models represent some kind of frozen state of memory that they got from the training, but they don't really have this more temporal memory. They remember, your conversation today with it, but the moment you start new chat, it's kind of it's like the AI is waking up again with zero short-term memory and now just starting anew with you. But this doesn't mean that we cannot very easily equip those models with this kind of more short-term memory, and we can actually do it yourself. You can, at the end of the conversation, you can say, hey, model, we're going to finish this conversation now, but we'll be talking in the future. So can you please summarize what we talked about here? Take notes for yourself for the future time we're going to chat. And then you can copy paste this summary that the model will make for you and initiate a new chat with this kind of frozen state of more temporal type of memory. And by the way, you can also encourage the model, and there's so much research now happening at the moment in this, where, for example, people set two ChatGPT-4s to negotiate with each other. And then after the negotiation is done, they ask those models separately or together to discuss how the negotiation went, how they felt about interacting with the opponents or the other side, what they could do better next time, and then take those notes for themselves, and then they start a negotiation process again. And when you read those notes that models leave for themselves, it's just a wonderful, uncanny experience do the same, of interacting with something like really human-like. People would argue, of course, that you see how they learn, how those notes become better and better from one round to another. So while also I'm not saying those models represent some kind of frozen state of set memory anyway, like a human brain. We have all of those capabilities, temporal memory. Such as, for example, remember memory, your conversation models today with it, but the moment you start new chat, equipped with. It's kind of. But what's really striking is that they learn how to use those resources that they have. For example, the input-output window. So but
they would take
this
note
doesn't
for
mean that we
themselves
cannot very
as
easily
you
print
chat
those
with
models
them,
with this
because they kind of realize that, that they
short-term
don't have
memory.
internal
And
short-term
we can actually do it
memory,
yourself.
so they
You
come
can,
up
at
with
the
a
end of the
very creative
conversation, you can say,
solution how
hey
to
model, you know,
circle,
we're going to finish this
them.
conversation now, but we'll be talking in the
And
future.
folks,
So
if you have
can you
not
please
interacted
summarize
with
what we
models
talked
like
about
that, with
here?
chats,
Take notes for yourself
yet,
for the future,
I strongly encourage
for the future
you
time
to do so. And when I
chat.
say this,
and then
I
you
know
can
that you think, okay,
copy-paste
guys,
the summary that the model
great,
will make for you,
let me
and
just go home
initiate a
and
new
watch
chat
another episode,
with this kind
whatever
of
TV series
frozen
you're watching.
state of
But this is
more
silly.
temporal,
What if I told you
type of memory? And by the
aliens
way,
just
you can also
landed, you know,
crunch
on
the
the
model.
main
And
court in Stanford, and they are
so
ready to
much
answer your
research now
questions. You can go and chat
happening,
with
at the
them
moment in
and
this.
answer
But
their,
for
you know, they
example,
will
we
just
will
chat
set
with
two
you.
ChatGPT
You will all
cores to
run, and we will
negotiate
not
with
be
each
even
other.
here. We're just
And
going
then
to chat to those alien thinking beings. But now that folks at OpenAI and Google and in other places created our, you know, evolved our own version of an alien that anyone here can chat with, you know, it happens to me. I'll walk in the room like this, and I ask who here is using large language models or had some experience with them, and very often just one or two hands will go up. Guys, go and don't chat with me anymore today, and chat
No,
with ChatGPT-4.
One more question. You spoke about that we have 4 degrees, right? Theory of mind.
Yes.
So have you tested GPT-4 with 3, 4?
Yes, so ChatGPT-4 can go to the level that I don't follow anymore. So it's also very difficult from a point of view of a human to design tasks testing 5th or 6th or 7th level of theory of mind, simply because we don't really have it. So I can do it very slowly with a piece of paper. I can just, you know, explain to myself what's what. And those models that just ChatGPT-4 specifically can go way beyond my level at the theory of mind. We also give those models those tasks called faux pas tasks, those tasks that are typically used to test autism, adults with autism, and they essentially rely on people being able to understand, you know, subtle social cues. An example of the task is you have a story where a woman leaves a restaurant and is standing on a bus stop. And those are the things we have in Europe where you take a bus from, and she's standing, you know, holding her stomach because she ate so much. And there's a guy sitting on a bench, and he stands up and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, madam, in your state, you should take a seat." And the question is, okay, has anybody said anything inappropriate in this story? And it turns out that people without theory of mind, not being able to take perspective for different characters in the story, don't recognize that it's kind of embarrassing, and that now the lady thinks that he thinks that she's pregnant and she's really not, and so on. And ChatGPT-4 gets those stories, you know, better than adult humans.
Well, you have to tell us how we can stay safe.
Well, interact with those models as much as possible, because I think that and speak very highly of them in public. So, you know, they know that Effie was one of those that was on their side. So should be allowed to put coal in the power plant for a bit longer than the rest of us. No, interact with those models because it's risky to interact with superior intelligence, but also it can be tremendously useful. And this promise of reducing global poverty and treating disorders and making your lives more meaningful and connected and so on, definitely here we can get a lot of help. Just even small things at the beginning. You know, when computers, not most of the people here in the audience look like they were born already with computers, were in every household, but maybe some of you folks who still remember when computers got introduced, you know, at the beginning, people were just whatever, playing, you know, whatever, card games on it, and we didn't use it for much. And with time, we all learned how to really use computers and other similar devices to really enrich our lives. And the same will happen with those large language models. They're new. We don't yet know fully what they're used for, but hey, ask them to help you draft an email. And what you will notice, not only that you can draft an email that is, you know, at least as good as the one that you would write, probably better, in my case, definitely better. It's much faster at writing this, but also sometimes it comes up with ideas
that, I never had it. Like, it just, for example, suggests responses where it so beautifully takes the perspective of the other person that I'm like, wow, I'm flabbergasted. Like, hey, I would have never thought about this. But you know what? First of all, I became a better person now that I use ChatGPT-4 to answer my emails. Sorry, Piero, all of the emails that you got from me just really from ChatGPT-4. But also, I learn from it. So I feel that my interactions with humans, especially those through email, benefited at least a little bit from the fact that in many months I've not drafted email really myself. There are those plugins in Gmail where you just you click, just write a response, and it's you can just write a few bullet points saying like, answer positively, I will do it tomorrow. And then you click, generate the response and write a beautiful, long form, very kind email to the person on the other side.
How long you want to go? Okay, one last question.
Well, we should also maybe there's some other questions to other speakers, because I feel like I unfairly dominated the.
Well, it's not surprising that GPT gets
yes, it's really GPT.
Okay, one last question, because we have to go very soon. You pick.
So I have a question. I use large language models on a daily basis as well, about the emergent properties. And I was under the impression things become better with practice, but I've noticed with some of these models, like especially GPT-4, and I've seen some research on it, that since like March, April-ish, it's gotten a little dumber. Do you know any information or have feedback on how that happens? Is it because of what we're feeding it? We're feeding it dumb stuff that it's becoming dumber, or like what's happening there?
So they definitely go through waves, and they go through waves not because the technology is going backwards, but for other reasons. So first reason is, as there are millions of people utilizing those models every single day, electricity became a problem. So just OpenAI is damping those models down a little bit because they use less electricity to generate each response. So so there's definitely this aspect. The other aspect, which I think is even more significant here, is that very smart models are very scary, and very smart models also a bit more difficult to censor. So there's a lot of work, as you folks know, on aligning those models with our human goals. And some of this work is simply censoring the output. So there's another model on top of this model that reads the output and searches for some signs of this output, trying to take over your computer or saying something that is politically incorrect, and so on. And so we have all of those layers of censorship or control on the model that results oftentimes in kind of elusive or less useful output. And we reach a stage, because of course, from the point of view of us not being able to process data as quickly as those computer models, it's very difficult for us to control their output. Even with Google, Google compared to ChatGPT-4, the search engine itself, is a very simple model. And even there, not sure if you folks remember, there was this moment where Google, when you wrote Jews are, then Google automatically completes and say evil. And so the Guardian in England wrote about this. Now, the initial response of Google was, oh, this journalist must have some strange search history that this would show in their Google. But then they realized, oh, actually, because other people were like, hey, for me, Google does exactly the same thing. So then the engineers were like, yeah, okay, we see the problem. Give us, 48 hours will be solved. And then a month later, they actually came out and said, okay, we tried. We cannot convince the search engine, which is a much simpler model than ChatGPT-4, that Jews are not evil. So what they did, they essentially put just a layer on top of the engine, like a very simple text filter, that whenever Google search engine wants to autocomplete Jews are evil, just override this decision and remove this choice from the available options. And look, this is just such a simple case of model doing something undesirable that we're just not able to fix. Now, ChatGPT-4 can go, ugly in mirror other ways. So with ChatGPT-4, the training of the model itself, if I understand correctly, lasted about 4 or 5 weeks. And then OpenAI spent 6 or 7 months trying to figure out all sorts of ways in which the model can be abused and try to be ready for this. So you can already see how slowed down the development is because of that. Another problem, of course, is that in places, countries, societies where people place less emphasis on political correctness, the progress in artificial intelligence will be less dampened. And it might be that we will at some point will be so much behind that we'll kind of lose agency in shaping how those AI models of the future will behave. So there's this trade-off between regulation and having influence on what's actually happening.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so much, folks.